Now we're live. I'm Tarmy. So I bet.
Yes, that was a word.
See, let's get all these little foot fumbles out of the way so that when we really start the show.
Really start the show. Huh. Should
Oh wait, we did.
Did we start the show? Okay, I think we're starting the show, Mitch. It's probably time to stop dinking around and get going with this thing in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello and welcome back to a messy desk day at the DSLR Film New Podcast Studio. I've got Mitch from Planet 5D joining me today to discuss lots of new things and some sad news. R.I.P. Vine, but we'll get into that in a second.
Sad. I'm so sad.
What have you been up to this last week? More photography of the marching bands?
Yes, as a matter of fact, and let me tell you, when you switch tools, and we're going to talk about tools obviously later today. Because the new Final Cut 10. Woohoo!
Oh, I'm so excited.
When you switch from something like Aperture to Lightroom, you know, I've always said that these things are all the same, right? I mean, it's just a different user interface. You still are going to do sharpening. You're still going to do this and that and all these kind of stuff. But I'm also throwing in a new tablet, a Wacom tablet. Have I told you about that?
Ooh, that looks fancy.
So I gave this to my daughter, who's an artist, some time ago because I thought it would be cool for her to do her art. Maybe she could do some computer art. Long story short, she decided she didn't like it. And I thought, well, I've heard about a lot of photographers who use Lightroom, but they also use the pen and the Wacom tablets. And I've always said Wacom, by the way, and it's been an adjustment to say Wacom because I've always thought it was Wacom. But anyway, so I'm adjusting to that too. So it's just really frustrating because I'm like about 2 weeks behind on editing photos, but I'm learning new stuff, and Lightroom's really cool.
So if you really want an awesome drawing experience / Lightroom experience and you're a Windows user, here's something you should check out. It's called the Cube i7, and it's a generic tablet from China, but it has the Wacom interface screen from the Surface Pro 2 installed on it with a 1080p screen. It's $314. Comes with a good stylus and works with all the Wacom, however you'd like to say it.
I was going to say, you're saying it differently than I knew.
I always say Wacom, but Wacom, that's fine. This thing is very cheap, very affordable, and I know a number of artists who use this as their travel version. And it does have a full system in it, 4 gigs RAM, 64 gig to up to a 256 gig worth of storage space, as well as a full Windows 10 experience. And
for $315?
Yeah. It does not come with the keyboard outright. You do have to add the keyboard separately for, I think, like $80. But still super cheap, comes with a pen, and all the reviews and the people I know that use it actually and are working artists actually like this as a very affordable, I don't care if it gets broken. And by affordable, I mean, it's all in perspective. Their Wacom tablets that they have at home, the large screen versions, are upwards of $2,000 to $3,000. So something small like this that has good pen resolution as well as controls is definitely affordable in the $314 range. Plus, it's an entire freaking tablet PC that's capable of doing the regular stuff that you would want to do on a computer. If you want to find that, the website you want to look for is called Gear Best. That's GEAR best.com. And they sell a bunch of weird generic stuff like that. On my end, go ahead, Mitch.
I'm sorry. Continuing on that, I found a fascinating article about Chinese manufacturing. And, we've talked a lot about Kickstarter stuff. The article specifically talks about a Kickstarter project that this guy came up with, an iPhone case that was a selfie thing. Excuse me. And he started running a Kickstarter project. And before the Kickstarter project ended, time-wise, like what, 2-3 weeks, a month, whatever, The guy found the Chinese knockoff of his Kickstarter project already available for sale. And the article points out the fact that, you know, what's happening now is that the Chinese have gotten so good at knocking things off that you almost don't have any proprietary products. I mean, you know, how do you create something today and not have somebody automatically steal it and have it out maybe better and faster before you can even produce the damn thing?
Well, the problem too, the Aviator crane, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
It was a Kickstarter from a while back. And I know the guys that worked on it, they're really great people. They actually went to a factory in China to have that made. And with all the plans and information, those factories basically have all the tooling set up to make those. And at the time, he only needed X number of pieces made, but the factory was capable of doing overruns that were substantially more than that. And even though you're contractually obligated not to make more or duplicate the product, I mean, they're already set up for it. How hard is it for them to kick out, several thousand more, put a different brand stamp on it, maybe cheap out on a few parts and then undercut the main one? And he was lucky. His crane was out for, I think, 6 months before they started duplicating it, but that's not very long profit window.
No.
In order to, and then how do you differentiate yourself? Your stuff is higher quality and you make sure to do quality control on it. But when the other stuff is half the price, it sort of turns into this thing where, well, you'll just deal with it if one of them breaks, or send it back, hopefully buy it through some Amazon or eBay where it's easy to return. And then once you get one that works, you saved half the dollar amount.
Yeah, well, let's remember that $314 PC tablet pen thing that you just talked about when we're talking, and I'm pointing down like you guys can see the show notes. When we get down to the new computers and the new software that's out.
And for those of you interested in that weird tablet, I'll add it to the show notes at the top so you can check that out. The i7 and i9. I don't know what it is about Asian companies and their necessity to add the I moniker to their freaking products. It's a little ridiculous. But
Apple started it.
Yeah, I think on that note, it's probably time for the news.
Let's do it. And I'm sorry I cut you off.
Time for the news. First up, we mentioned at the head of the show that Vine has been cut down, so to speak. I thought that was a good pun there. Maybe not. Vine, the short 6-second video application for Twitter, which actually I thought was still quite popular, especially with comedy and viral advertising and so on, has been discontinued. Twitter has plans to focus on their core business, and they have cut a staff of over 350 people from the department that handles Vine. The app will go away. The videos will not. They promise that they will do it the correct way and leave those up for you to view in the near term. No word yet on the final verdict for what will happen to videos, but you are no longer able to post new Vine videos to the platform. Vine was one of those things that I loved to check out occasionally, but I never really got into myself. I know a number of YouTubers that transitioned very well from YouTube to Vine, doing very comedic little short bits with pets and other, songs and so on. But Mitch, did you ever use Vine? Are you sad that it's gone? And what does this mean for Twitter in the future? Are they still floundering, trying to make a profit?
Yes, no, and yes. How's that? I did try out Vine a couple of times. It's like much of this stuff. I think it looks cool, and it sort of depends upon how things work out in your life. My kids loved Vine for a little while. They would send things back and forth to each other. They ended up moving off to Snapchat because Snapchat could let them do photos and videos once they got videos in Snapchat. I think Snapchat's a much more popular service than Vine is.
Do you think Instagram had any part in this when they added their up to 60-second video snippets that you could put in there?
I'm sure, because when you have a service that's exclusively one format, like Vine was 6 seconds and that's it, which, you know, and you force everybody to do that, and then the other services give you multiple features. I mean, it's just like, let's go back to the DSLR, right? Why was the DSLR so popular for filmmakers for a while? Because you could not only do stills and video, and you had a great sensor, right? So I'm maybe that's a bad example, but you know, people tend to navigate to things that do multiple functions. And I mean, we haven't talked about the new Apple stuff yet, but the new Apple TV software that they came out with, announced yesterday, part of the demo was Twitter. And I know you watched the complete. You watched the complete podcast and the hour and a half of Apple promoting everything they've got. But what Apple's do, I'm sorry, what Twitter's doing is on Thursday. I think they have the Thursday night football game.
Okay.
So they have this exclusive where they broadcast the Thursday NFL game of the week, and on the side, and this is on their new Apple TV app, is all of the Twitter things that are specifically happening for that live feed. So all the hashtags get amalgamated, and so you can watch Twitter streaming on the right-hand side while you're watching the football game. And therefore, but you got to understand, DJ, you and I both, and for those of you who are listening to the audio, DJ just winced.
I just made a face.
And maybe those even on video couldn't see it because there's, Google Hangout switching. But when my daughters watch a TV show now, like the ones they really, really love, they are sitting there with their phones looking at the hashtags and tweeting and posting on Vine, not Vine. We're talking about Vine dying. But that's sort of become a norm for the newer people. The old people like you and me are like, hey, I just want to watch the show. But they're tying all the social media stuff into these things. So is Twitter going to die? To answer your last question, I think they're struggling, but they're certainly coming up with new ways to keep themselves relevant. I don't use Twitter as much as I used to, but I was primarily using Twitter to look for news stories for Planet 5D when I used it. Now, there is so much stuff on Twitter now, it's hard to be seen.
Well, the description you're giving me of video with a chat room on the side sounds very reminiscent of the late 90s MTV Live system, and to a lesser extent, maybe the pop-up video system where people could basically log in and then they would stream a window of chat or notes by users on the sides of video playing on the main screen. It's interesting, but it doesn't seem like a new concept, and it seems like almost going backwards. Now, getting back to the video format, because we've kind of gone off trail here with Twitter in general.
Us?
Vine, the interesting thing about Vine was that it limited you to 6 seconds. And the reason I liked that is because it inspires a major amount of creativity to make something that is even remotely interesting in a 6 second window. That's not a very long time to create something, and people did some amazing stuff with that. Punchlines at the end of the 6 second joke, very great choreographed musical bits. There's one where a guy just sneezes for almost the whole 6 seconds, and then the last sneeze his suit changes. And it's like, I mean, it's not amazing content, but it's really interesting. And it's kind of sad for me as a person who likes creative stuff to see a platform that forces people to be super creative in the work that they're making go away. Do you think we'll ever see a duplication of something like this in the future, or is this 6 second or shorter video format pretty much gone for good?
Well, you can still create 6 second videos and upload them to YouTube, but
they won't loop anymore.
The 30-second commercial in the front.
Oh, geez.
You have to also remember that Twitter was created with a 140 character limit to try to force you to be creative, right?
That's true.
So, I mean, that's why the two fit together, I thought, so well. But did they ever, was there ever a way to monetize Vine?
Yeah, so placements of ads inside of your Vine stream. Very popular Vine individuals would do some funny stuff, and then occasionally they would do a brand sponsored Pepsi, makeup, jeans, whatever,
Right?
and it would be featured in their video as part of their comedy slash commentary routine, and that was paid sponsorship. Some of them were in the $20,000 to $30,000 range. Some of them as low as $300 or $400. There was actually quite a bit of cash to be had at the peak of the Vine universe, so to speak. But you had to have a lot of followers in order for that to be a
Always,
monetary value.
always true.
Now, moving on, because we've beat this one into the ground, let's go ahead and talk about some new stuff. First up, I wanted to mention this just for those of you that are on the A7 series of cameras. This is an E mount to EF mount Canon adapter for your Sony cameras. It's electronic, and of course, it has an ND filter in between the sensor and the lens. This is great for people who are using wide angle lenses and need to get a variable ND in there. The difference between this and Capcon's previous adapter is simply that they've added a little bit higher range. There's 7 stops of variable ND on this. It still has the ability to take the ND filter out if you want to, and the sliding wheel, of course, is located at the top. This will set you back about $430. It is not extremely interesting, but a useful tool if you are in the market. Mitch, any comments on this before I continue down the news line?
I think that looks pretty cool.
I think $400 is, or $430 is a reasonable price for an ND filter for the wide angle variety of lenses.
Well, it does have an adapter function to it, so yes, to be able to combine the two, why not slide in a speed booster while you're at it?
Well, now this is full frame to full frame, so that would be a very
Okay.
that'd be impossible, basically.
Okay.
The issue I have with this, and it's not a bad thing, it's just that you can go buy even a nice, is it Sine Ray? I think is the one of the higher end variable ND filters. I have a couple of them laying
Yeah.
around, and I need to pay more attention to the brands. But you can buy one of those for like $140, and that would be like an 82 millimeter diameter for very large lenses, and that works for everything down to probably about 24 millimeter. You get lower than that, and the variable NDs start to go wacky. This is good for 16 to 35 millimeter, but at that point, do you really need shallow depth of field in a wide angle lens? Because even f2.8, there's a lot of stuff in focus, and you could stop your lens down. How often are you in a situation where you have so much light that you need to stop down further than what the lens is capable of? And $430 is a pretty expensive proposition when you can buy regular electronic adapters for Canon to Sony mount for maybe $80.
Are they that cheap?
Yeah, they're very, very affordable.
Those Chinese guys. Sorry.
Yeah, it could come from any country. Let's not just put it on one. All right, moving on down the line. Let's talk about this. This is actually something that is fairly interesting. If you are into industrial video, which actually I have done a lot of in the past, this is really exciting for you. This is a small, compact, super zoom, 30x zoom range on a drone. And the reason this is interesting is not just because you can now zoom in on sporting events, but imagine for a moment, if you will, that you could provide a service of, say, inspecting a communications tower or looking for problems on a given device that is 50 to 60 feet in the air, or structurally checking the outside of a building for various damages at high altitudes without having to get a ladder, a crane, or some of the other things that are necessary. Or hey, maybe you need a serial number to replace a part off of something that is 50 feet in the air or 100 feet in the air. You can fly your drone up, zoom in, and grab this. This is the DJI Zenmuse 3:30, and it is exciting for me. Mitch, how do you feel about zoom in the air on your drone?
I'm incredibly excited about it, DJ.
Good answer.
Well, let's just talk about how privacy could be invaded with this.
Oh man, that's
Yeah. Obviously, we don't advocate anything like that, but and that's where we haven't talked about it much. But I was just skimming the news, and some country. Have you heard this? Was it Sweden?
I think Switzerland or Sweden, one of
Switzerland,
those two.
one of those S words has banned drones in public areas because of privacy issues.
Which is interesting because you're still allowed to take photos and videos in public.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really researched that, but this looks fascinating. I mean, one of the knocks on doing drone stuff has been that you've been locked into, one sense or one lens, and what it is. So being able to zoom in 30x is pretty cool. And I certainly see lots of uses for it, like is shown in this article.
There are drones right now that are capable of using a zoom, but most of them require multiple pilots and are in the 8 propeller category. This actually brings it down to a price tag that could be somewhat affordable, and to the point where a private operator could simply start doing this as a side business or as a full business. The only thing I worry about is with the new drone regulations and the issues that they have about doing drone flying as a business. How does this relate to that? I mean, you have altitude limits for one, and obviously at some point, if you're doing something like that, maybe you're going to fly your drone up over the 500-foot range, especially if you're checking towers that are required to have flashing lights and so on. I mean, you get to the altitude where a strobe or a red light is required. I mean, that's plain flying level. How would you police something like this? And do you think the regulations will adapt to cover this sort of inspection in the future? No, these are too difficult questions for this early in the morning, I think.
The answer is no. You can't. I mean, it's just like
I feel like I'd have to ask for a. You almost have to have a license card. Okay, you're going to do this inspection. Can I see your permit for flying this drone? Okay, you're good to go. Because 28-minute flying time. You get up there, you do your inspection. The guy forgets, the drone plummets to the ground, takes off a child's head, kills 3 puppies, and bam, you are in trouble.
The problem with policing these things is there aren't enough police in the world. It's just like building the wall. It's just not feasible. It's just not. Obviously, there will be. I mean, it's like speeding, right? I mean, you can speed all you want until you happen to go right by a policeman or a speed zone trap with photos. So it's still the Wild West in a lot of it, but you should follow the regulations. Don't try to do stuff. I noticed on the website, somebody, eclectic guy, asked what the price is. There isn't a price, is there?
No, not yet.
The only thing listed here is to contact enterprise@dji.com. Now, when I see that, what does that say to me? Ching, ching, ching. If you want enterprise pricing, it's not going to be cheap.
Well, so at my office, we do a lot of video production for industrial applications, and there's a zone at the office that is high security, and it's fenced in, and then it has guards and everything else. And the other day, they found a drone in the high security area, just like parked in the middle of this yard, this section where no one's supposed to be unless they have specific access and they've passed several clearance exams and done these other things. And it turns out that several of the people that work at the office had talked their boss into letting them buy a drone to test out for some video applications we needed in the future, and then just nonchalantly flown the drone in there, ran out of battery, and landed it in the secure zone where you were not supposed to be.
Oops.
And I mean, luckily it was internal, and we were able to sort it out and figure out who it belonged to, and there wasn't a big issue. But if that would have been a private person flying that in, I mean, it is a federal facility there. That could result in numerous fines and jail time. And then on top of that, the security issues. Some of those rules are very, very strict. They could result in years of jail time, not
Nice.
just months of jail time, which is, I don't know, things like that just make me really nervous for the drone community in general.
Yes, I agree. And we all think that it's just so fun and games and so easy to do, and you don't think about those kind of things.
Yeah, like the guy that landed on the White House, drinking in the middle of the night, and then flies his drone over to the White House yard. Okay,
Yeah.
moving on. Let's talk about a slider that I'm actually kind of excited about. If you guys have read DSLR Film Noob in the past, you probably know that I love flywheel sliders. The issue with a flywheel slider is actually that you have to attach belts and other devices to your slider in order to get the flywheel to spin up and spin down. And that flywheel provides very smooth action on the slider as you move across because of the force that's required to move the flywheel. This is an update to that design, and an interesting update at that. The Duzi V4 actually incorporates the flywheel into the head of the slider itself. No longer are you required to use belts or anything of that nature. The flywheel spins up inside of this device and allows you to basically get that same effect without having to tear down and set up belts on your slider for different lengths. This thing will set you back around $450 for the 32-inch version, and I believe slightly more for the longer version. But Mitch, have you ever used a flywheel slider, first of all? And
No.
second of all, would you spend this much money on a nice slider?
Why you, for those of us who are uneducated in terms of flywheel sliders, why are you so excited about them? Does it make them smoother?
So let me show you here what the flywheel looks like. Imagine the force that it takes to move a flywheel. Initially, getting the flywheel to spin, it requires a large amount of force that you have to push against. If you've ever used a slider without any sort of resistance at all, when you push the slider, the motion is completely controlled by the smoothness of your hand, and there's nothing to push against. So if you aren't completely smooth with your move, your sliding will be sort of fast, slow, and you'll notice it stands out really strongly in video. But if you have a flywheel, you're actually pushing against the spinning force of the flywheel to get it to start. And when you let go of the motion, the flywheel has to spin down. Because of the linear ramp rate that it takes for that flywheel to spin up and spin down, you always end up with a very nice, smooth taper off as you slow down. And you always end up with a very smooth start. And with a small amount of force applied to the flywheel, you can control the velocity of your camera without giving any sort of shake to the movement of the camera itself. It's a beautiful, excellent, lovely way to move your camera around. And I know some of these sliders are very expensive. The Shark S1 flywheel slider I use is around $750 to $800. And that's where this actually also got me excited, is look at the price on this, Mitch. $49 is a fairly affordable price. And the fact that there are no belts, the travel distance on this isn't nearly as long as the Shark S1 slider, which I know and love. But you know, at this price, that's half the price of the Shark slider without having to deal with the belts and so on. The downside, though, is that you do have to deal with weight. A flywheel is just a heavy circular piece of metal, and you have to carry it around with you in your pack wherever you're traveling. And the Shark slider is no exception. I have to check that or use it as my carry-on, and it weighs 25 to 30 pounds, which is a fairly substantial weight. With all that in mind, Mitch, you gonna buy one?
No.
No.
First of all, I love Cinevate products. I've been really happy with stuff that I have gotten from them in the past, so that's a very good plus. I don't know. I think the name is interesting. It's a doozy, all right.
They've been
Uh,
sticking with that name. I think this line of sliders has been around. This is the fourth generation, obviously version 4, but this is the first one with the
Flywheel.
flywheel. The rest of them, honestly, I'm with you. I like Cinevate, but some of their stuff it's just kind of it doesn't excite me that much. This actually was an exciting product, although it is a doozy.
It is a doozy. Um, and if anybody wants a Philip Bloom pocket dolly, by the way, speaking of sliders, let me know. I got one to sell. Um, I don't know if you've noticed your audio has gone to pot. I know you can't hear your own audio, but we're having that problem that we had last week.
Oh, wonderful! Love
and
it.
and Sapphire just said maybe his vocal cords have a driver issue. that that was a good one.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and and so I don't. It happened to us last week too. I don't know why. And it's only your side. It's not my side. So maybe when you move,
Well,
things will change.
yeah. How's this? Is that a little bit better?
Yes.
All I did was hit reset on the audio. Google Hangouts is awesome, guys.
Yes.
Definitely recommend it for everybody. Anyway, continuing on the slider, Mitch, you have a Philip Bloom pocket slider that you would like to get rid of?
Oh, that was just a side joke. Yes, I do, as a matter of fact, but so far I haven't been able to sell it. So if anybody wants it, just let me know.
If you ever go out slider shopping, um, stay away from the resistive sliders. And Kessler cranes, they make some good sliders, but their resistive system is not the smoothest to use, and it takes a very fine finesse to get it right. If you're
It,
new to sliders and you haven't used them before, a flywheel is pretty much user proof as far as getting a good move.
I'd be interested to try one. I did not know that they were a thing, so you've taught me something today. And that was exactly the problem that I've ever had with sliders is trying to get a smooth move is a real pain, especially with the ramp up and the ramp down. So I'd be interested in trying something like this.
Well, I know. Remember, Canova sliders
Uh-huh.
were the hotness for quite some time with their linear bearings. The issue is the linear bearings were so smooth that they showed almost every inconsistency in hand
Yep.
motion. You almost had to use like a rubber band or something like that and put the brake on just a little bit to pull and get sort of somewhat smooth. But I feel like I have very stable hands, and I always had trouble with that. As soon as I
Well,
got a flywheel slider, it changed my life.
and even the Philip Bloom Pocket Dolly slider has this handle on the end that is, you're supposed to be able to smoothly spin, and I could never get that right either. So,
Yeah, you really have to keep your hand moving at a very consistent rate. That's the difference, though. If you've ever used a pan head and tilt that's gear head driven, those have such a small gear ratio to turn that if you're a little
uh-huh.
bit inconsistent with your spin,
Yep.
it doesn't matter because it'll make up for it.
Right.
But with the pocket dollies, the spinning motion moves the camera quite far, not extremely far, but far enough that any inconsistency in your spin will give you problems. And
You're not helping me sell this thing very well. Huh?
it's greatest slider I've ever not liked. You should definitely get one. Oh, okay. Anyway, check that out if you're interested. Cinevate
It's a doozy.
Duzi V4. Not a sponsor of the site, but definitely looks like a really interesting slider. Moving on to some announcements from Microsoft. It seems like
Yes.
Microsoft is going in the direction of Apple these days with their own laptops, their own tablets, and so on. And this is no exception. This is the Surface Studio. And basically, this is a 28-inch screen attached to what looks like a fairly attractive Surface laptop-esque box. This is very reminiscent of that sort of half-circle iMac that was available in years past. And this folds over. It provides a full interface touchscreen slash Wacom style or Wacom
Whatever.
style drawing surface, and it's for your desk. It's very attractive. Very high end laptop parts are being shoved into this thing, and it'll set you back around $3,000. Now,
Ching!
Mitch, that is expensive, but when we think about the comparative high end devices. We mentioned the Wacom large drawing surface earlier. That large drawing surface from the 28-inch version will set you back $3,000 to $4,000, and that's just a surface to draw on. That does not include a PC to go along with that.
Right.
Now, this is a full PC and everything in a creative suite sort of setup, and you can get the specs in this, ramp it all the way up to where it'll set you back $4,999 was what I was reading for the top end model.
And that's where you have to start, to be honest.
Really, you think so?
Well, the base model, the $3,000 model, has 8 gigabytes of RAM in it. All right.
Okay.
And it's got a 500 gigabyte hard drive. I mean SSD. The base model. I'm like, $3,000 and I get 8 gigs and a 500 gigabyte hard SSD. Come on. Everybody that I've watched and chatted with is like, okay, so you got to start with at least the $4,000 model or something, something that's got some decent RAM in it. The second thing that slays me about this, and it's true with the Wacom device that you were talking about, that's the big panel. So you got to have a clean desk. And
Yeah,
I
that's
could
true.
never handle having a clean desk. I just wouldn't be do it. I'm doing fairly well with my $200 Wacom bamboo tablet here on the side. It acts like a big trackpad, so I can use my fingers or I can use the pen. It's not like exactly drawing on the surface, but I think it's really cool. I'm glad that Microsoft is doing something like this. Don't get me wrong, it will appeal to a lot of people, but obviously it's not something I'm going to buy. But I think it's pretty cool. It's innovative, and it's not something we expected out of Microsoft. But you also remember that they started with the Surface. How long ago was it? Has it been like 10 years since they created the one that they had in the bars and stuff that was like a $10,000 table, and you could put your drinks on it, and it would order new drinks when you got low and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if you live in the Seattle area, you can actually go to the Redmond campus at Microsoft and see one of those in their demo table labs, and predominantly featured in many CSI and crime story style television shows for whatever reason is the table slash large display with a touchscreen interface. To me, I talked to a good friend of mine, Amos, who does a lot of art projects for people. He was kind of on the fence about this. At first, he was excited, but he moves between a small surface device where he can draw on the go to a large desktop setup that's on an armature and moves around. And for this, he thought it would be great on a standing desk. And he thought it would be good for people in sort of a productivity environment where they are going between spreadsheets, drawing, and back to spreadsheets again. But he didn't feel like it solved all the issues that would come up. What he wanted out of this, and I thought it was kind of interesting, was a possible maybe $1,400 or $1,300 version of this that was just the screen and the stand.
Yeah.
Without any hardware, and the ability to just plug it into his already well-suited PC in order to get going.
See, that makes more sense to me. But that ends up turning out being, the Wacom tablet things, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't see them competing there. I certainly agree with Steve Jobs has always said, like he's still alive, wish he was. People don't want to draw vertically, right? It has to be much more horizontal. So even though you can do a touch screen like an iMac, it has to be able to go horizontal-esque, because this doesn't go all the way flat. But this new Surface Studio is much more appealing because you can put it down and draw on it horizontally. Again, if you could keep your desk clean, that would be great. I wish I could do that.
I'm looking at my desk right now, and it is just filled with junk. There's crud all over it. It's a mess as usual.
But I think it is very innovative. I'm glad to see Microsoft trying to do something like that instead of just folding up, bad pun, and going away.
Now, while we're talking about the competition here, and you mentioned Steve Jobs, there were some Apple announcements as well, and I am not as keen on following things like Final Cut Pro or the new Mac Pros, MacBook Pros, and so on. Mitch, tell me what's going on with the latest announcements for Final Cut Pro.
Final Cut, total redo. And it's basically
very good this time.
Well, no. There are a lot of people that I know that do Final Cut. Final Cut's an awesome piece of software, and it's gotten a bad rap, and Apple definitely screwed up the launch. There's a couple of things that are really nice about it. Number one, the fact that they actually came out with an update. There have been a lot of rumors, people suspecting that Apple was giving up on Final Cut, just like they gave up on Aperture. And to see them actually come up with something new and really appealing, and not just a little minor blip upgrade, is impressive to me. It reinforces that they haven't totally given up on the professionals and just ceded everything over to Adobe. Now, that being said, of course, I'm still pissed off that they gave up on Aperture. But now that I'm using Lightroom, it's a pretty impressive program, and I'll go back and I'll say, so let me hold on to this thought and go back to the user interface is so different on this version of Final Cut, and I downloaded it, installed it last night, and I went, whoa.
Really?
Because it's things are still sort of in the places where they were, most things, but there are lots of little nuances. They've flattened the UI completely. They've gotten rid of a lot of the fancy icons and stuff. But there are things that used to be in the center of the screen, they're now in the top, and they make more sense being where they've put them. But the folks over at, and I'm just, Ripple Training, I'm going to post a story this morning on Planet 5D about the Ripple Training. They have released 6 or is it 8 videos that are like 5 minutes apiece to get you through the user interface changes. They've obviously had their hands on this for quite a while. And they're also selling a 2-hour training program for $40, which I have not yet had a chance to look at. But having been through the conversion from Aperture to Lightroom, and I've mentioned that several times on the show, it's really nice. I'm taking a training class from a guy here in St. Louis. It's every week on Mondays for 8 weeks. And I have learned so much more about using Lightroom than I would have done if I had just done it on my own or spent hours and hours trying to surf through a million different videos on YouTube. I still advocate that getting training is very beneficial. And if you can find some training, like, for example, this $30 training from Ripple, and again, I haven't seen it yet, but there are preview videos. There are 8 videos to get you through the user interface changes, are wonderful. The first video is like 6 minutes, and they zip through the entire user interface and where all the things are compared to where they used to be. And this, anyway, long story short, you're going to need some help. I think there are some people that are just software gurus that can bop in there and go, well, yeah, I see where these things are. But it's really nice to have somebody spend 20, 30 minutes walk you through where all the new things are and what new features you have. I mean, the feature list of new stuff is monstrous. How does it compare to Adobe Premiere? I don't know, because I don't ever use Premiere, so I can't tell you which one. It's kind of a leapfrog thing. I think there are probably some features in the new Final Cut 10 that aren't in Lightroom, but they'll be in Lightroom in a couple of weeks. So I don't know. It's great to see Apple continue this. I was afraid they were going to kill off Final Cut. I like Final Cut because that's where I was born and raised. And so I don't really want to move over to the other tool.
Now, what about some of their lower end stuff? You mentioned that they got rid of their photo editing system. What about iMovies? Is that going to die off eventually too?
No, I think iMovie is going to stick around for quite a while. I don't know that much more that they could. Well, I don't know. They probably could come up with a lot of things to add iMovie and make it a Final Cut light. iMovie works really well. I don't know why they would get rid of it. It's things like iMovie and Photos are great tools for the basic user to get in and do stuff, and they come free with the operating system with the Mac when you buy it. So why wouldn't they include that? Because that's just a selling feature, and it costs. I mean, relatively speaking, the amount of money that they spend on upgrading those and maintaining those is nothing compared to the hardware that they sell because it's all integrated. So I don't see that those would ever go away.
The reason I ask is there's a huge difference between Premiere Elements and Premiere Pro in terms of editing. And it used to be that if you started on Premiere Elements, you could easily learn enough to transition to Premiere Pro. But in the modern iteration, Premiere Elements, if you learn how to use that, you will be lost in Premiere Pro because the editing interface is so much different. And I've never used iMovies, but the people I've seen using it, it looked quite a bit different than Final Cut Pro. Is it the same transition, or is it enough to learn one and then go to the other?
I think that it's the latter. I think iMovie and Final Cut are close enough siblings that you can go from one to the other.
Okay.
My wife, I love my wife, and bless me, I'm not saying anything negative about her, but she's not a techie, geeky, programming kind of person like I am. And she went from iMovie to Final Cut, and she's using Final Cut now. The other thing that I didn't say that's a major difference here is that Final Cut update, excuse me, there's a tickle. This update is free. And Sapphire posted in the chat room, I would love to move to Premiere, but I can't afford the monthly fee. If you already own Final Cut 10, and I think it's $49, this upgrade was free. They did not. This is not like a new generation. They didn't move to generation 11 or anything. It's just a free upgrade. So you're getting some massive new features from Apple for no additional cost for those of you who already own it.
Yeah, mentioning the fee, I still am a little frustrated that Adobe moved to a monthly fee subscription.
It's $49 a month.
It is expensive. I get mine for a little bit cheaper because I've bought full versions of Premiere in the past. I think I pay $30 a month for mine, so I save $19. If you do, and this is a pro tip or a cheap tip, whatever. If you have a family friend, family member, or anybody else that you know that is a student, the full Adobe suite is, I believe, $8.99 on sale if you catch it at the right time a month for the year. And you can buy those in advance. You can buy 5 or 6 of those and stack them on top of each other. So if your wife's going back to college or you're going back to college, or your son is in college, I'm not saying you should cheat anybody, but if you do not want to afford the $50 a month that it sets you back for Premiere Pro and everything else that comes along with the Adobe Master Suite, you can get a subscription for a year and then get another subscription for a year and keep adding them to your accounts and have 3 or 4 years of affordable Adobe Premiere without having to worry about the expense of the monthly cost. Now, you do have to pay it up front. So, if it's $10 a month, you're going to have to pay $120 up front to get that. But that's 2 months at the regular price, which
Right.
is very affordable. For me, it's kind of a drain because I would often wait a couple of years before I upgraded to the next version of Premiere. When I was on 5, I probably waited 2 years to move to 6. And now I'm basically forced to pay the upgrade cost every year in increments of monthly charges. So
Yeah.
it's sort of frustrating to spend, what, $600 plus a year. Adobe.
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand the business model. Like now I get updates on a regular basis. There was a flaky version of the latest Premiere that was out, and I got an update maybe 3 weeks later that fixed some of the issues that I was having.
Uh-huh.
And that is really nice. And I know that now with a subscription-based service, Adobe can move on those updates more rapidly than they could previously and add features more quickly. But at the same time, I don't want to spend that much money, and I'm kind of cheap, and I am a little bit jealous of your Final Cut and the fact that it is one price and you own it and you buy the next one when you want to.
Okay, I'm wrong. Eclectic Guy says it's currently Final Cut 10 is $300. I was wrong.
That's still
But
not bad. I think I
but
paid
yeah,
$1,400 for the Master Suite last time I bought it outright.
right. And I paid that money for Final Cut what 2 years ago when they upgraded. So it's been $150 a year plus I got the free upgrade. And the other thing that um, I've got the right now since I'm just doing Lightroom. I do think it's nice that I'm only paying $8 a month because I'm getting Photoshop and Lightroom, and I don't have to pay so I'm obviously not getting Premiere and all the other tools because I don't have the full suite. But it would be kind of nice if there were a way that you could just pick like say I wanted to do Premiere, but I didn't want to do all the other tools,
Yeah.
and paid just $10 a month for that as opposed to the full $49 or whatever.
That's a very good point. I have a huge list of stuff I have access to as a master's collection, paying for the full suite, but uh, 3/4 of the stuff is not stuff I use at
Uh-huh.
all. I mean, I'm not doing web development. I very rarely use Illustrator for anything in
Right.
particular, and all these other things. I would love to have a duplicate of the photo version of the subscription service for video editors. That was just the basic package
Yeah.
of
Right.
Premiere, Audition, and After Effects, and maybe SpeedGrade. Those four things right there would be pretty much my entire Billywick. I could go without Photoshop. I'll use GIMP if I really have to.
You're one of those guys, huh?
I mean, well, Photoshop is one of those things where it's like you need it occasionally, but you need it so rarely
Right.
that you could feasibly, get away with some half-ass method of creating the exact same thing. And for me, I don't create a bunch of stuff all the time in Photoshop. I'll use Lightroom quite a bit, and occasionally I'll do some text or some layers in Photoshop, but I could accomplish probably 3/4 of that in other software if necessary. Now, speaking of
So,
software, let's talk really quickly about the Windows Creator, which is the next release for Windows 10. They're going to be adding a bunch of little bits and pieces to Windows. This includes stuff like a audio editing system that looks very similar to GarageBand. It also includes a new version of MS Paint. For those of you who are really missing out
what?
on MS Paint, the classic horrible picture editing, not picture, I wouldn't even call it that, the drawing application that comes native with Windows. They're going to be adding a 3D drawing application that is called MS Paint 3D. These things together are supposed to make Windows more accessible to people who are doing creative things like making music, drawing, and 3D printing. These are also things that we've basically seen on the Apple side of things for quite some time. Mitch, you excited about this at all? Do you care? Is this something you're going to run out and
No.
mess with?
Well, yeah, I am never going back to Windows, first of all. So, no, this isn't appealing to me. Um, I think it's good that they're finally getting up to par with what Apple has been doing in terms of having bits and pieces to be able to give people tools without having to buy another piece of software. But I'm sorry, no, I'm not. I'm not going to Windows for this.
All right, well, that's it for that particular section. Let's move on to something really cool. I've got two more things I want to touch on before we get out of here. One is this, and this is actually a Kickstarter. First of all, let's start out by saying this is already in production. These guys are just, we're trying to get enough orders together in order to make it a little bit more affordable for people. At $700, this is a three-dimensional laser projection system that allows you to draw up to 200 vectors and produce those vectors at a range of 60 frames per second, which means you could actually do 3D models similar to something that you would expect out of, I don't know, maybe a holodeck of some kind on your desktop. Now, the practical applications for this are fairly limited, but the fact that you can have holograms floating on your desk is pretty darn cool. Get a chance to take a look at this Kickstarter?
I didn't see the actual Kickstarter, but I saw the video on Wired or something like that yesterday, and it's pretty cool to be able to basically show a hologram like they did in Star Wars in midair somewhere. Pretty impressive. I'm just not sure what the hell anybody would use it for. I mean, maybe presentations of some kind at this point, but it's a good start.
One of the things I put in the show notes, and I just thought this was kind of fun, is if you think about the history of video games, the initial video games were vector-based because they were easier to create. You had stuff like Asteroids, and those are games that still sort of hold up today because they didn't have any sort of sprites that they had to draw out or images. It's just lines. With something like this, if they advance in the future to the point where you could draw thousands of vectors simultaneously at a frame rate that made it seem like it was floating in the air, imagine a video game where you could play in a almost cube space.
Nice.
And move around. I mean, a more advanced version of Asteroids, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you'd have to think about how you do design in something like that, because now if you can see all the sides of something, do you want to look at a face and then walk around it to look at the back of the head? No, you don't. You want to see the face all the time, but how do you get the face to stare at you when you are moving around? So just some interesting things to think about. As far as video applications go, I don't know. I almost pulled the trigger just to create a crappy short sci-fi film and then use this in it because it would be really fun and practical effects. But interesting stuff. I'm excited about that, even though it's not extremely video related. Now, something that is video related and probably interesting for a number of you, if you are a owner of the very cheap, and I actually have it right here on my desk for some reason, the 4K YI Action Cam, Yi Action Cam, call it what you will. They have recently updated the firmware on this, and you can now stream your video to either Facebook or YouTube, or Facebook and YouTube simultaneously if you use the Open SDK. This thing will stream at 1440p, which is also very interesting and adds basically another value proposition to a extremely affordable $249 action cam.
Nice.
Now, Mitch, in the past with GoPro, Hero 4, and so on, you had to have a backpack in order to do some of this stuff. Do you think that's a proposition that will entice people to move to a camera like this? And what are you going to do? What are you going to stream? What event do you want to stream with your YI action cam?
I want to stream the DSLR Film Noob podcast, so you and I could both. Wait, that would be separate streams, so that wouldn't work. The users wouldn't like that. So, I don't know. I still haven't found a whole lot of usage for Facebook live streaming. It's interesting. Speaking of that, and maybe other people are different, but I keep going back to the ability to have live conversations like Skype. And when my oldest daughter went to college, we made sure that we could Skype and we could use Apple FaceTime so that we could, have a conversation every now and then if we needed to. And I don't think we've used it once because everything's text these days. I mean, everybody is so fascinated on doing that kind of stuff. We don't need the necessarily live interaction. Although I'll go back and say that, God, I wish we would use the phone more often because texting takes forever.
Well, and sometimes you just can't get the information across in a text message.
Right. But I was on Facebook yesterday, and one of my friends posted a video, and I was like, well, this must be interesting because he never posts a video. So I started watching it, and it turns out he took his car through a car wash, an automated car wash, and recorded the whole thing and posted it to Facebook. And I'm like,
what?
Okay. I happened to be getting ready to go somewhere, so I left it running because I kept thinking, oh, there's going to be a joke or something at the end. And no, the car wash ended and he drove off. And I'm like, okay, why did I just waste my time on that? So I'm not answering your question very well, but I don't have anything that I need to live stream.
Well, I thought it might be fun to stream kids, like if you have grandchildren, hey, look at Grandpa, he's playing, or the kids are playing over here, or it might be a little bit on the gruesome side, but some people like to join in the delivery room, and you stream something weird like that. I don't know, life events, I suppose, graduations, things like that. In the chat room, several are mentioning concerts. I would worry about the quality of audio.
Oh yeah,
from something like that in a concert situation. I don't know. My wife and I, when I have to travel for projects around the world, we use videos to talk. The live view sort of thing to talk to each other because in those times you're away from each other for a month or two at a time, and having a video interaction is a little bit more personal than having a audio or text interaction. That said, when I'm not away, I completely stop using that feature, and it sounds like that's sort of your thing too.
Yeah.
Streaming stuff, I mean, if I'm doing something really crazy and cool, I still want to film it, edit it, and put it back together again. No one's going to know whether or not I did that yesterday or 5 days ago.
Yep.
And frankly, do you think they'll really care, if the footage looks better because I was able to edit it as opposed to live stream it? Now, there are interesting applications like the skydive from space that Red Bull sponsored.
Nice.
That's really cool to watch live. But even that, when they say you're watching it live, how many minutes behind the actual jump were the viewers? Maybe 45 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. You're not really live per se. Even live TV isn't live. Is it that much of a detriment? Well, it might be to the interactive community if there's a chat room involved, such as this one down here. But otherwise, I would rather wait a couple days and see it Well done, and it's fearing to me. Or I'm fearful of people like you mentioned, the car wash guy. Great. You're gonna set up your live action cam and do dishes. Nice. Watch you do dishes. Maybe someone's into that. Maybe they are. But that's so much content coming out that has nothing to do with anything no one wants to watch that it will flood the market and push down the good content that will be buried in the sea of other
Yeah,
junk.
and we are definitely buried in content. Are you in a hurry to get out of here?
Oh no, I got a few more minutes. What's up?
Okay. Well, we didn't talk about the new MacBook Pro.
Okay, lay it on me. Lay it on me, man.
Did you see anything about the new MacBook Pro?
I did not catch the announcement, and I was rather busy last night,
Okay.
so I missed everything to do with the new MacBook Pro.
So the new MacBook Pro is insane. It's not that insane.
Did they make it 1.2 millimeters thick?
Yes. And God, I don't know why they have decided that thin is the ultimate marketing ploy. Apparently it works. I love the chat room. Oh boy, here we go. So they've added an OLED strip at the top of the keyboard and removed the function keys. Now this I think is brilliant. What I'm waiting for, however, is for them to remove that. And if you're watching live, you can see DJ scrolling through that and pointing to it. The fact that that toolbar is there is just phenomenal, and it's very functional. The ability for the operating system to change the contents of the visual floating toolbar and be able to use it as a touch screen. I really like that concept. What I would like to have is that on my trackpad or on my Wacom tablet, like I'm using now, or even on the trackpad itself. I have an iMac and I have an external trackpad that I use. As opposed to right now, the only place you can get that and use that is on the brand new MacBook Pro. So it's rather limiting. It's a great, cool little feature. The negatives of the MacBook Pro are costs. They've raised the price like $200 to $400, and the base price is $14.99, whereas the base price of the 13-inch used to be, I think, $12.99.
Okay.
And the upper end price is like $24.99, I think, or $23.99. So it's the 15-inch is just crazy. I think the base price of the 15-inch was $19.99. So it was just right at $2,000. So I'm pretty sure they've gone up $400. And
it's a slick looking device. I'd love to install Windows on it.
And the side part of it is that it has the new keyboard, which I tried out the keyboard that they put on the 12-inch, and I didn't care for it. So they say they've changed it slightly from what the 12-inch keyboard was. It's very flat keyboard. And they have removed all of the ports and converted them all to USB-C ports. So where you used to have USB ports and Thunderbolt ports and the Mac, why can't I just suddenly come up with the power cord, the mag-free power cord where the widgets pop off if you accidentally bumped it.
They got rid of that. That was
the
amazing.
MagSafe, yes. It's amazing that they got rid of that. But I saw that coming, frankly, because the 12-inch that I was talking about a minute ago didn't have that. If I recall, it doesn't have that. They went to the USB MagSafe. Thank you. Major mistake, if you ask me. Why couldn't they do all of the USB-C things? Why couldn't they make those MagSafe kind of adapter things? If they went through the trouble of redesigning USB a long time ago and came up with this USB-C, why didn't they just make all of those magnetic? Of course, you know, sometimes you don't necessarily want that coming free, maybe. So I just, a lot of people are, you know, after every MacBook or every new announcement by Apple, there is screaming that all hell is breaking loose and the Mac is dead. Apple has lost their minds. And everywhere you go, it's just like the Canon 5D Mark IV announcement. There is so much pissing and moaning online about how this is the worst MacBook ever. And Steve Jobs will be rolling over in his grave. I've seen that half a dozen times.
Now, wasn't there something with the keyboard? Did they remove like a function key or?
Well, they removed the entire row of function keys and put that OLED strip there. So there are no more function keys.
There's no function keys, period. And now
Correct.
they have the touch strip.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and that's, frankly, it makes a lot of sense, because if you can programmatically change what those things do, and if you see some of the demos that they did yesterday during the announcement, to make those context sensitive. So if you're in Photoshop and you're using a clone tool, suddenly all of those function keys are just specifically things for that tool. It's brilliant. So it gives you the ability. Now, the negative to that, and I've seen several people talk about it, if you're a keyboard shortcut guy like I am, and maybe you don't look down at your keyboard very often, to suddenly have those. Well, you don't have to use them, but I mean, how many do you actually use your function keys, DJ?
Yeah, actually, I have several of them programmed for shortcuts in video editing. I also have macros programmed to my function keys for repeated tasks such as photo resizing and so on.
So do you touch type to those function keys, or do you have to look down at your keyboard?
I look down at my keyboard, so I guess I could program them to anything.
Right, and to have them visually change, I think is key, because one of the biggest complaints that people like my family have, because you and I both use keyboard shortcuts like crazy, is how do you remember what the hell those things are, right? I mean, I know if I hit Command Option Shift L in Lightroom now, I can do a specific function. But wouldn't it be nice if I were in the develop module that toolbar changed so that I could just go, oh, there, I just press that virtual button and it does that function, as opposed to me having to remember Command Shift Option L?
Now, I might be a special user, but you've heard about my old crappy keyboard.
Oh, yeah.
I love this thing. One of the things that it has and I'll see if I can angle my camera down so you can see this, the function keys on this are separated in sets of 4.
Right.
So when you are heavily using the function keys, 4 at a time, if you think about the way I have these programmed, a set of F5 through F8 are set up to do my trim, pause, play, and cut. And those 4 functions I can sit and walk through on a regular basis.
Right.
If they were a touch screen interface, I think it would still be almost as convenient as what you're describing. The issue I have with that whole strip is that while you say, yes, you can have program-aware features on there, that requires programming on the part of the application creator in order to properly implement. And if there's only a single device that is capable of utilizing that particular feature, is it going to be worthwhile for developers to create an extra thing that they have to do work on and manpower requirements for only a small group? What I think MacBook Pro users only represent maybe 10 or 20% maximum of the mobile PC / laptop market.
I think it's a very interesting question, and like I said when I started ranting about this, the fact that I want that toolbar on other devices, like my Wacom or my trackpad, as opposed to it just being only available in the MacBook Pro, is exactly what you're pointing at. Now, I think it eventually will be on multiple devices.
Okay.
I can imagine that Apple is working on a new keyboard for the iMac, which needs to be refreshed. Which would
$300 later.
Yeah, exactly. And like Apple needs more profit, right? But one of the things that's very, very interesting that is untalked about so far, I've only seen one person mention it, is what is the ramifications? If you watch the demo that they did yesterday, this MacBook Pro, although they limit you to 16 gigs of memory, which is very surprising, but maybe you don't necessarily need 32 gigs of memory based on the way they've improved the operating system.
We need all the memory.
I know. And I severely question their concept here for not letting you have 32 gigs of memory on that. But in their presentation, they talked about two things fascinating. And don't let me forget this. And if you have to go to work, let me know. Number one is they showed a 5K monitor that is not an Apple monitor. So they have worked with LG, and they have, I think what they're really basically saying is they're not going to develop external monitors anymore. So they have specifically worked with LG to create a 5K Retina like an iMac screen specifically designed for the MacBook Pro.
Huh.
Yeah, that's a big because I don't think they're going to do external monitors anymore. And maybe they don't need to because everybody buys the other ones anyway because they're cheaper, right?
That's true. And they're of the similar quality.
And so working with LG makes a lot of sense. So they showed, especially with the USB adapter, the LG monitor has 3 USB-C slots in it, by the way. So you could just have one plug, like a dock. You could have your external monitor with all of your devices, like your hard drives and all that kind of stuff, and then just have one cord, which is also a power cord, by the way, coming to your MacBook Pro. So you have, if you buy that LG monitor, you have an external dock and an external monitor, and you just have one cord that goes to your laptop when you come home to work.
That doesn't sound too bad.
And you can daisy chain that to a second 5K LG monitor, so you can have two 27-inch external monitors plugged into your MacBook Pro, and they demo 5K or 4K editing with the new Final Cut Pro on there. So it appears to me, number two, this is my second point, is that they may be dumping their Mac or their trash
Pro line
can because realistically, how many people these days really need to have the trash can Pro $10,000 computer? There are some, of course.
I mean, I'm raising my hand right now as even in a PC owner, I'm working on probably a $7,000 system.
Yeah. But I think there are a lot of people that have decided that they don't need an iMac, they don't need a desktop computer, and they're living their entire lives on a laptop. And if this laptop, the 15 inch, is beefy enough to do the work that they need to do, then with two external monitors driven, with one cord, why not? I don't know. It just kind of had that feeling to me that they didn't want to be selling that MacBook, not MacBook Pro, the Mac Pro.
What are we talking about for graphics cards in this guy, though? I mean, you're mentioning all these high-end editing applications, but the key feature of the trash can was dual GPUs built in, and while they were soldered on and non-replaceable, which is frustration in and among itself, they were still of very high merit. Are they squeezing something amazing into this thing? Are you going to be able to get? Are they finally going to move NVIDIA, or are we getting a GTX, or is this still going with the AMD side of the house with the Radeon card?
I did not look at the specifics on the graphics cards, but I suspect the answer is that you wouldn't be happy.
That's usually the case.
I mean, yeah, and several people in the chat room. Stan Perry said, "I love the trash can. I need the trash can." Um, and I don't know. Maybe they're going to continue, but the Mac Pro is what, 4 years old now. I mean, they are way behind in updating that. The iMacs have come out much more recently than that thing. So
Yeah, I just looked into it, Mitch. It is a Radeon GPU inside that they're going to be relying on. So you're still not going to be able to take advantage of CUDA in Premiere, which is the rendering speed up that I enjoy immensely on my PC. Rubbing it in a little bit here. I don't know. The GPU specs are looking middle of the line.
yes, Apple never puts top of the line stuff in there, of course.
Two 4K screens.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think they would get rid of their Mac Pro lineup just to be replaced with a MacBook Pro unless they're going to only hit the middle of the market, because you're going to be you'd be getting rid of a very large number of high-end users by eliminating that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe once you get to a certain level, you move over to I don't know, maybe a PC, but
and as Sapphire points out in the chat room, Apple never lets you know, and I mentioned this before about Final Cut. They never let you know until they decide to to not sell something, that they're even considering not selling something. So after 4 years of not hearing anything about the Mac Pro, what are they doing? Are they going to upgrade it or are they not? I mean, it would be nice if they would at least say, we're working on it.
Sully mentioned in the chat room too, QuickSync, Intel's QuickSync, and while that is a really awesome option for video rendering, if you're not familiar with QuickSync, go take a look in depth. Intel has implemented on-chip processing that allows for extremely fast video transcoding. The issue there is that no one seems to be excited about implementing it into software applications that you normally use in regular production, which is very, very frustrating as well. That might be a solution to speed up devices like the new MacBook Pro.
Yeah,
it looks nice. I will tell you, as a PC user, I have always been jealous of the rather sexy looking devices that are available in the Mac line. And I'm looking at the time, Mitch, and I do actually need to get out of here because this went a little bit longer than I thought. So any last words before we get out of here, and then we're going to go?
No, I know you've got to get to work today. Sorry about that.
I got sucked into the conversation as well, and I realized that I have 15 minutes to get dressed and go.
Okay, bye.
I am wearing clothes. On that note, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Mitch, where can people find you?
Planet5D.com, PlanetMitch.com, Planet Mitch on all social media.
And on this end, you can find me at DSLRFilmNoob.com. You can find me at Twitter, or on Twitter at DSLRFilmNoob. On YouTube, One Lone Dork channel. You can find this podcast in SoundCloud, iTunes, and anywhere podcasts are distributed. We appreciate a like, a subscribe, and write some comments, write some questions, complain, do whatever you want. We love to hear from you. We love to read those. It's great to interact with you guys. And thanks for showing up live for the chat room. I mentioned that live is dead, but live is not always dead, because it's great to talk to you guys in the notes and in the chat room while we're talking. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on another episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. And that's it for the audio listeners, and also probably for the video listeners, because DJ has a job. All right, Mitch, see you later, man, and I will see you next time.
All right, great. Thanks, DJ. Sorry.